It is Casual Tuesday here, Iowa, the voice of college football. Appreciate everybody being here. We are waiting for Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, to join us, but we're going to be talking over the next hour all about Iowa football, spring football beginning next week, the wide receivers, the position that we are focusing our attention on this evening or this afternoon, and certainly talking about a group that I think has a lot of promise, a lot of depth. You see my Super Fran T-shirt in tribute to March Madness. And here's the one and only Mark Rogers. Oh, he was with us and then he's gone. There he's back again.
I did not know that you were already live.
I am live, Mark. I figured I would
set myself up. Give me a few minutes then. I thought I was starting us up.
Okay.
Give me just a second. I'll bow out.
All right. Brandon, good to see you here, sir. Go Hawks. Absolutely. Man, it's just a crazy time of year. You got spring football going. You've got March Madness, if you're an Iowa fan, which I know, Brandon, I've seen you in the chat before. You are a basketball fan, as I know many are. Yeah, just a great time, man. This is awesome. Obviously, the wide receiver position, Iowa dealing with some attrition there over the past couple of years. But they're bringing a lot back. Tyrone Tracy moves on. Desmond Hudson, who really didn't see any playing time at all as a Hawkeye, he's gone, of course. Quavon Matthews transfers to a group of 5 down in Florida. So they lose a few guys there, but they get a lot of experience back with, Nico Reganey. Charlie Jones is back for an extra year. And then you got the young guys, Arlen Bruce. You've got Keegan Johnson, who I think has an opportunity to be one of the better receivers in the Kirk Ferentz era. Perhaps that's a bit premature, but certainly I think you can argue that. And then Jacob Bostic is another guy who's going to be coming in here, has some good length. Iowa doesn't really have a lot of size, but he does have some good length out there. Brody Brecht is really the only guy that really fits that, what I like to call prototypical X position, like a Brandon Smith or a Desmond Hudson. With Hudson moving on, they really don't have a lot of length at wide receiver. How important is length? I think that's debatable. But again, without a lot of length, they do have a lot of experience, and that's the good news moving forward. And we'll talk about the position in depth here in a little bit. Erica, good to see you here, ma'am. I'm always used to saying sir to everybody, so I got to switch that up for Erica. Thank you, Erica, for being here. And Brandon, yes, we'll be here for the next hour right here. With the voice of college football. I'll be live over at my channel, From the Hawkeye of the Storm, for a live basketball show tonight with Tony Perkins' uncle, Frank Henderson. Going to be a great show. We'll be live at 9 p.m. Central Time for week 191 of Bradda's Branded Thoughts, my podcast. So be there or be square. That'll be a fun show. Frank, a great personality. First of all, he's a former D1 player himself. Was Tony's AAU coach, is his uncle. So he provides some tremendous perspective on how big Tony Perkins has been. You can't be overstated. Springtime 0502. How about them Hawks? And it's just just an odd time. We're not used to so much momentum on the basketball front leading into football and spring practice. Connor, where'd you get that sweet shirt from? I really don't know, Mark. I've had this shirt for a long time. It's Super Fran because, of course, Iowa's head basketball coach is Fran McCaffrey. And so I'm embracing being a homer this week. I'm completely embracing it. I know you're not a college basketball guy, but I believe this is the best week of the year as it relates to amateur sports. I love bowl season, as you know, Mark. I know you love bowl season as well, but this is just a great stretch from conference tournaments to the first and second round of the NCAA tournament.
I agree with you. I think it's amazing. I think the tournament's amazing. I haven't watched it when I say I haven't watched it, it's not that I've watched zero. I haven't watched it. I watched it adamantly for decades. And for the last 5+ years, I really haven't watched it. But that's no knock on college basketball. I just have kind of lost interest and don't know what's going on. Who's Iowa got?
We got Richmond. Richmond.
I did see Thursday. That. That's right. Okay. The Spiders. Okay.
The Spiders. I'm going to watch Arachnophobia this week to get ready.
To get ready.
Yeah, Richmond, and then they'll play the winner of Providence and the Jackrabbits of South Dakota State. So, which, by the way, interestingly enough, Iowa could play the Jackrabbits in basketball, and as you know, they open with the Jackrabbits in football. So kind of ironic there on the FCS front.
Yeah. Richmond made its name with an upset of Syracuse way back.
Richmond's
A
got a great
second
program. And
seed. Yeah.
they just won 4 games in 4 days in addition to what Iowa did. They won 4 games in 4 days in the A10 tournament, beating the top 3 seeds, including Davidson, who's a tournament team, and Dayton, who is the first team out. So that's a good team. They run a Princeton offense, which is sort of unique. I mean, something that Iowa really hasn't seen all year. So should be an interesting one.
Did they change the configuration of the tournament?
When did they do that? I mean, it's been years.
Well, no, I'm not talking about the first 4 in regards to the field expansion to 68, but I was looking at the games that are being played on Tuesday and Wednesday.
Yeah.
Tuesday and Wednesday? Yeah, they start tonight.
Yep.
Looks like there was like 18 games.
No, you're probably looking at NIT games.
Okay. I looked up NCAA men's basketball schedule and I just saw this glut of games and I thought, my goodness, did they expand this thing again?
No,
okay,
there are
so we just have the additional 2 games, correct?
2 games tonight, 2 games tomorrow. Correct.
Oh, so it is an additional
4 games total. The first 4, keep in mind the first 4, the at large, which are Wyoming, Indiana, Rutgers, and I'm missing who Rutgers is playing. But my point is
Notre Dame.
First 4, and then there's Notre Dame. Thank you. And then there's 2 sets of 16 seeds who are playing for spots, who are AQs. So that's how they expanded the field to 68 way back when. That wasn't that long ago, though.
Maybe at least 5 years.
Yeah, something around there. And of course, the women, what's unique about the women is you have the top 16 teams, Mark, being able to host. So Iowa's hosting, Iowa State's hosting right here in Ames, which is really cool. Both the women's teams are doing great, and they may actually be able to have a rematch in the Sweet 16 if they both win. Sweet 16 or Elite 8? I think Sweet 16. So no, it's a great time of year. And spring football, I mean, a week away, and I mean, usually Iowa fans at this point are kind of, a lot of them, not saying all of them, but a lot of them are starting to kind of get back in football mode. But man, Iowa basketball's this has been a great run.
Did the Iowa women make the field?
The Iowa women won the Big Ten regular season and won the Big Ten tournament, Mark.
Okay.
So
here's what I don't like about the women's tournament. Well, I could make a list of what I don't like about the women's tournament, but I'll keep it to this one thing. Since you brought up who's hosting and their method of hosting, because they want to draw crowds, they have, home schools host that are typically 1 seeds, but sometimes they play around with that, or at least they did in the past. And the only reason I have any knowledge of this is working at ESPN and working all the brackets and being in production operations, having to keep track of all this. And we used to have all the color-coded regions and trying to figure out where we're going to move games to constantly. That I always found it kind of odd and unfair that there would be sometimes 1 seeds that had to travel and play at the home court of, let's say, a 3 seed that was deemed to be just a more popular team, I guess, that would get to host.
So you're in favor of the new format then, right?
Well, I don't know what the new format is.
I mean, the new format is the higher seed first of all, it's just for the first 2 rounds. So the top 16 all get home court. So, in other words, if you're a 5, you're going to have to play at the 4 at their home court, even though you're not playing the 4. So I think it's Colorado and Creighton in Iowa City for the first round. That the winner of that game will play Iowa, the winner of Iowa, Illinois State for the women.
Okay, so these are all home games in the first round.
First and second round games, yep.
Oh, okay. When did that start?
Technically, if Iowa loses, Mark, technically it's just a neutral site game for both teams. But correct, for the higher seeds in the top 16, it's a home court for the first 2 rounds. And then you go regionals just like the men.
Okay. That must be fairly recent.
Yeah, I think I know we've had Iowa hosted a couple of years ago. This may be the first year they've actually done it in this format, because Iowa City has been a regional, or excuse me, a first and second round host in the past. But I think you're right. I might have been this year, possibly last year, that format has taken shape. And Iowa, I mean, there's no question about it. The committee loves Iowa. They ranked Iowa. They put Iowa as a 2 seed, which I did not expect. But I will say this. You're going to get a lot of people in Carver. I don't know if they'll sell out, but that's hard. That's hard to fill up an arena, 15,000 for a women's basketball game, whether that's fair or not. but Iowa fans packed it. They sold out the conference clinching game against Michigan just about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So yeah, no, it's exciting. Lots of great stuff. And then again, right here, what a mile for me, you've got the Iowa State women hosting. And those two teams could end up playing each other. I don't know. I'd have to look back at the regional where they're at for the Sweet 16. But ironic that Iowa and Iowa State are both hosting, and then to play each other, they have to go out of the state. But that's the way the tournament's set up.
All right.
So real quickly here, Mark. Jermaine says that he's used to seeing Mark on the left and Corey on the right. So do you want to switch around here, or are we?
I think we should shake things up this week, and people can just get used to it. They got to get used to you being completely decked out and having the hat on, and just as you mentioned, just wearing your fandom on your sleeve, or however you phrased it. They can
Homerism. It's Homerism is all.
Yeah, it's Homerism. For me, it's neutralism, unless maybe I'm rooting for Kentucky this month. I don't know.
Your real MVP will love you for that. Erica says, Mark, are you coming to us from a different place? I don't see the helmets in the back of you.
Yes, I'm on the road at somebody else's house. Yes, I'm staying with family this week, so the decor has been different. Absolutely.
Glad you're able to travel. Beautiful, nice weather where you're at. I'm not going to press you as to where you're at. I know it's beautiful here in the Midwest. It's 55, 60 degrees here in Iowa.
I'm in Ohio. It's at least that warm. Yeah.
Spring's right around the corner.
I'm nice.
So Greensboro, thank you, Hayden. Greensboro is the regional for the women. Appreciate that. So yeah, I was just, before you jumped on, Mark, I was just kind of previewing the wide receiver position for Iowa. I know that's kind of been our focus for today. And Springtime, I don't want to ignore him. Sorry, Springtime, this super chat. Appreciate the super chat. He says, before football, any predictions on wrestling? I got to be very careful about what I say about wrestling, Mark, and I'll tell you why. I did one wrestling show this year, and that was when Iowa was hosting, or excuse me, yeah, was it in Iowa City? Yeah, it was in Iowa City. It was Penn State, Iowa, which of course is number 1 versus number 2, and Iowa lost that narrowly. But I got torched afterwards because I did a show without, according to the listeners, without any knowledge of what I was talking about. And it's very true. I don't know a whole lot about wrestling, and I admitted that. But then I have people who say, why don't you do more about wrestling? So anyways, Springtime, I'll just say this. Penn State is without question the favorite. I was disappointed with how Iowa performed in Lincoln, although I didn't get to watch much of it because of the women's tournament. The women's basketball tournament, fortunately, is timed at the same weekend as the wrestling, the Big Ten championships. But, I give Iowa a shot. Spencer Lee being out hurts you. I think if Spencer Lee were competing, I think Iowa very well could have beaten Penn State that day and be number 1 right now. But individually, they had their ups and downs at the Big Ten championships. But, look, between Cassiope and Kemmer, and they just got a lot of guys who are seasoned and well experienced. They're going to take home some individual titles. As far as a team title, I think that's probably not going to happen. I think Penn State's just too strong. But it's just, again, great to have wrestling back to close to where it was. I'm not saying it's back to the Gable era, but it's back to somewhat prominence and big rivalry between Iowa and Penn State. You get Lee back next year. He'll be back for one more year. And I expect that even though they'll lose Kemmer and they'll lose some guys, I expect Iowa to be able to compete. Maybe not win the title next year. They would have won it the COVID year. There's no question about it in my mind. So they'd be 2-time reigning champions right now if that had happened. But I think they got a good chance of at least being right there with Penn State next year. But we'll see. Anything can happen in the tournament. It's just not quite as hard to predict as men's college basketball. Certainly women's college basketball has had that reputation of being easy to predict over the years, which has become a little bit less easy in recent years. But you never know in a tournament format.
I moved to Connecticut when I got the job at ESPN, so that was late in 01. So basically starting in 02 was I familiar with UConn women's basketball. Now before that, I covered the SEC for 7 years. So the SEC, when I was down there, even though there wasn't a lot of interest in women's basketball, the conference did very well in women's basketball. The top 15 was just stacked with SEC teams. So I was covering ranked teams all the time. And but then I got to Connecticut and realized that people actually care about women's basketball somewhere. And that was in Connecticut. Like they talked about the women's teams just as much as the men's teams.
And Ohio State, I mean, I know Ohio State, I know it's not talked about nearly as much, but Ohio State women have a really good team and typically do. So, I
Yeah.
mean, now I got to ask you, Mark, because I don't know this. We haven't had these conversations, but you're an Ohio visiting family. I don't really know were you born and raised in Ohio?
I was born in Chicago, but my family is from Ohio. And as soon as my dad got transferred back, I was back in Ohio at the age of 4 or 5. So I grew up in Ohio. Yes.
Okay. And if I may ask, and everyone else on this stream, um, did you spend any time in the central Midwest? I mean, specifically Illinois, Iowa, that region at any point in your life?
No, I have not.
Have you visited Iowa in your life?
I've never been to Iowa in my life.
Wow. How
Did,
about that?
there would be no reason for me to. So I've traveled from Mississippi to the College World Series in Nebraska.
Which is pretty
I did.
Iowa.
I didn't. Did I cut through Iowa? I don't remember.
Well, you're in Omaha. I
On
mean,
the drive.
jump the river and you're in Iowa.
Okay. So I've done that twice, but I've not spent time in Iowa. No.
Don't say there's no reason. You need to come to Kinnick sometime, Mark.
I need to do a lot of things in life. Every time I talk with a different fan base, they say you need to come to Doak. Well, you need to come to Miami. You need to come all these places.
Kinnick
Kinnick
is special.
Yeah.
You know, and I think even you know, I don't know that you'd say it's the best environment in the Big Ten, but it's close. I mean, obviously, I don't think the Big House. I've never been to the Big House, but from what I've heard, the Big House is impressive, but it's not as loud as you'd expect it to be. The shoe, I'm guessing, is pretty darn loud. But everybody always says how difficult it is to play at Kinnick, especially at night. So,
what is capacity? Like 85?
No, not that high. I think
80?
we're looking at like 69, maybe a little over 70. They took some of the seats away because they revitalized the north end zone, which actually made it louder. Yeah, not nearly, because what is the shoe?
111.
And the Big House is
just, they stay about 1,000 in front. 113, 112, 113.
But it's the way it's set up. It's just
yeah, it's a big bowl.
And have you been there before, Mark?
I have not. I've only been to one Big Ten stadium. That's Ohio Stadium.
Wow.
I've been to more SEC stadiums by far.
That's incredible to me. Well, you just don't have time anymore. I mean, you probably just don't have time to travel these different games, right?
Yeah. Anytime I think about the only time I've traveled since I've been doing what I've been doing that I've traveled for this, in fact, was there was a week 0 game 2 years ago, 2019, between Miami and Florida. And considering the fan bases that are interested in our content, I thought, okay, it's a week 0. Nobody else is playing of significance. So let's hop on a plane, go to Orlando, and take in the Miami-Florida game. So that's what we did.
Well, that would be on my bucket list, Mark, to be able to just go around and travel. And my wife and I have done that here these last couple of years, because I've never been a big traveler in general. I've been a lot of places in the States, never really been out of the country. Been to Canada once, but I mean, never really had that desire. But one thing that I've always wanted to do is just visit different sports venues. And so this year we went to Lincoln, which you may giggle at that, but it's a beautiful facility, the Pinnacle Bank Arena. And of course, we're right by Memorial Stadium, but Pinnacle Bank Arena is a beautiful new facility. We went to the barn up in Minneapolis 2 years ago before the pandemic broke loose, and not necessarily what I'd call a beautiful facility. It's like the exact opposite of Pinnacle Bank Arena. It's old, but it's got that sort of nostalgic feeling, and it was a cool place to be. So next year we'll probably try to get to Evanston or to Champaign. We'll see, Mark. If Iowa gets to the Sweet 16 next week, it's in Chicago. They're in the Chicago Regional, and Iowa men's basketball hasn't been in the Sweet 16 since '99. So
wow.
I'd have to take the trek down I-35 and over on 80 and get to the United Center. Never been to the Bulls Arena, so it'd be a treat on many different levels. But
I've been to more baseball stadiums by far than anything.
And that's something that I have not done either. Were you? I'm guessing you were excited though this past week with the news of baseball returning.
Not nearly as excited as I would have been 20 years ago. But yeah, I was. I spent my night then listening to the MLB Network, having it on all night to hear as much as possible about the agreement. I did. I gravitated to that over. That was a big conference tournament night.
And so, how much college basketball will you watch this week? Will you watch any?
It's hard to. So I'm here, and I've got a few friends close by, and on Saturday, this was on Sunday. This was kind of interesting that so I went out to lunch with a few friends on Sunday, and then I went back to one of my friends' house afterward to hang out. Well, his brother started watching I was cognizant. Now, if this was 10 or 15 years ago, I would have been like adamant. We have to be somewhere watching the Big Ten championship in particular, but also the other ones. But the Big Ten in particular, I would have been adamant about that 10 plus years ago. Wouldn't miss a Big Ten championship game. But now, whatever. So we go back to my friend's house, and his brother is watching his brother went to lunch with us, but he instantly turns the TV on and puts on the Cleveland Cavs replay from the night before. And I'm like, do you know who won this game? Yeah, the Cavs lost by 10 or whatever. But he insisted on, we didn't argue with him, but he proceeded to then watch during conference championship games, tournament games, watch the Cavs replay.
That was this past week.
This is on Sunday, yes. So it gets better. After he's whipping through the timeouts and the breaks. So he condenses this thing down to probably an hour and a half, if that. And so he gets done, and the Big Ten championships later in the day, like Eastern time, like 3:50, something in that range.
Yeah.
So he gets done watching that, and he says, "Do you guys care what we watch?" And I said, "No, we can watch whatever, but the Big Ten championship game is on." So he turns it on for all of a minute, and it's like the first minute of play, Iowa Purdue, and I think we're all set to sit here and watch the Big Ten championship game. Again, in my previous life, I would have blown a gasket if somebody would have turned off the Big Ten championship game.
Yeah.
So we watched this for all of a minute, and all of a sudden he's grabbing the remote and starts watching the UCLA Arizona Pac-12 championship game again from the night before. And I said, and I knew it was I didn't watch the game. I didn't, but I flipped by it a few times. And I said, you know who won this game? And he's like, yeah, Arizona won by 8. But he proceeds to continue to watch this game from the night before on replay while the Big Ten championship game is being played live.
Okay, the only explanation I have for that, Mark, is he a big Buckeye fan then, basketball and football?
Yes.
So I'm guessing perhaps it's because I can tell you this. I would normally watch the Big Ten championship game, but if Iowa bows out and I had high expectations for the Hawks, I may watch something just because I'm pissed off. Iowa's not there. No,
I'm going to say this in a courteous sort of way. He's just an odd individual. That's the answer for it.
Okay.
That's the answer.
So you didn't get to watch any, I'm guessing you didn't care to go back and watch highlights or anything like that.
We got through the Arizona UCLA game, which we all knew what happened. Once we proceeded to watch I'm an expert on UCLA and Arizona now. I'm all caught up on, not an expert, but all caught up on the personnel. Watch the entire game.
Yeah.
We got to the end of the Iowa Purdue game at just the point where it failed to be interesting. It was when Iowa surged ahead, like in the last 90 seconds of the game.
Okay. Yeah.
Like it was like 64-62 as soon as we got to it. And I thought, at least I can watch the last 90 seconds. But it seemed like within a split second, it was like 69-62. And I'm like, okay, I kind of missed the good part of the game here.
Well, Mark, let me put this in perspective. What happened Sunday, and I promise we'll get to more football. But let me just get in perspective. Me as an Iowa fan, a lot of Iowa fans who are on here now. Some of them live, they're a lot older than I am and lived during the Tom Davis era and during, maybe even back into the Lute era and Raveling and whatnot. But what happened this past Sunday, and you're included there, Mark, but what happened this past Sunday was the greatest Iowa basketball moment of my life. Okay, now put that in perspective for a second. I'm 26 years old. I was around. I remember I was 10, and I remember the tournament. I remember when Iowa won the tournament in '06. But that was the last time they won the Big Ten tournament. Again, Sweet 16 '99. So I was 3. I didn't know what was going on. So it was a really, really special 4 days. Um, and for this team to be able to do it, and when a lot of people didn't give them a chance, I mean, all the hype train was full blown last year. With all these shooters and Luka Garza, programs all-time leading scorer, and it's just a pretty incredible run. So I was sort of the hot pick right now in the tournament. You and I both know, Mark. People who are demonstrative about, well, Iowa's going to be here, they're going to get upset. We don't know. The tournament, that's what makes it so great, is there are upsets. I mean, everywhere. Every year there are upsets at almost every seed line. So I hope that Iowa can get back there. Again, you get to Chicago, you're going to get a lot of Jayhawk fans if they advance. I think they will. They've got a pretty favorable draw to get to the Sweet 16. It'll probably be Iowa, Kansas if Iowa can get there. Yeah, just an unbelievable run. And there'll be a lot of Iowa fans in Chicago for that game. So, yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. It's a pretty special time to be a Hawkeye. We mentioned the women winning the Big Ten regular season championship, won a share of it, I should say, won the Big Ten tournament. Wrestling, even though, they're down Spencer Lee right now, who is one of the greatest wrestlers to ever wrestle here and compete here. They're still probably the second best team in the country. And then, as much as we talk about how football needs to improve in certain areas, they did win the West. I mean, they were back in Indy just like the men for a championship game. Now, certainly went a lot better than the football game did, but that's a pretty cool story. I mean, the athletic department in track and field just won a Big Ten championship. The athletic department is in pretty good shape, and I've been critical of Gary Bartamark, and you probably heard me be critical of Gary. But I'm not really saying he should be fired. I don't think I've ever said that. But even if you wanted to fire Gary Barta, it's pretty hard to do when all your teams are winning. I mean, how do you do that? Unless he screws something else up with Title IX, or and he's had some hiccups over the years with field hockey and just PR and whatnot. But it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for that to happen. But it's a good problem to have, because Iowa sports in general is in a great place. I did like this comment. This is kind of a good segue to football. Let me see if I can find it here. Springtime says maybe Iowa football can take some notes on how to score points. I do. The narrative used to be, Mark, when Iowa basketball just didn't play defense, and there was a good stretch under Fran these last 4 or 5 years where there was very little defense being played night in and night out. And it was, think about, put yourself in my shoes, Mark, as an Iowa guy. You watch football in the fall with basically no offense. You watch basketball in the winter with no defense. So the narrative was, why can't we just have, Fran coach the Iowa football offense, Phil Parker coaches the Iowa basketball defense, and you'd have two powers. And that's really the truth. The good news for Iowa basketball fans, though, it seems like Fran has found some lightning in a bottle here with some good athletes and long, aggressive defenders. And that's why they just won the Big Ten championship. It came together at the right time. And that's what Iowa football can do, Mark. If you can figure out how to rejuvenate an offense that has some good athletes, we'll talk about some of them today on this show with the wide receiver room. They're not that many changes away from being able to be good. And they don't have to be great, but if you're good, they're going to be competing for a Big Ten title. So it is frustrating.
We will also segue from basketball to football on a programming note, because I'm going to credit the real MVP for this idea. I thought this was pretty ingenious, because I've held fast to our network of channels being football only, and we have held fast to that. Sometimes we delve off into the NFL, around the Super Bowl with nothing going on in college football, that sort of thing, just briefly, but we have held to football. However, the real MVP had a great idea, because we've got a Notre Dame channel that's within about 25 or 30 subs of 1,000. And he said, wouldn't it be great to do like a watch party on Notre Dame basketball? And you get your Notre Dame folks in there and you encourage them to subscribe. And I would do it in such a way that I could not in any way comment on the game, other than to watch the game with everybody else and comment on I know basketball to a certain extent. I'm not an idiot. I can watch the game and comment on the game. I don't know the personnel. And if it gets boring, then we talk more football than basketball. But if the game's good, we talk more basketball than football, and wherever the discussion takes us. And so be looking out for any of the channels, possibly, depending on my own personal schedule, us doing watch parties, whether that be Ohio State, Michigan, whoever else is playing, of course, Iowa, Miami, USC, playing basketball games, that we could do some watch parties just to see what the feedback is.
I think you'd have, I don't know this, but I think you'd have some serious people on there for Iowa games, Mark, because I mean, again, there's just so many. I'm not saying other teams, but Iowa's one of the hottest teams in the country right now. And by the way, somebody brought up Arizona. You brought up Arizona because you watched them. I did. I did my bracket release last night, Mark, and I didn't realize that. It's kind of like when I picked Iowa over Michigan in the Big Ten championship game. I didn't realize that predicting something like, "Oh, Arizona's going to get upset at some point," would create a firestorm. People just don't like that, apparently. I've got Arizona losing in the second round, and a lot of people have them winning the national title. But as you know, Mark, it's all about upsets. It's all about matchups. And TCU right now playing great ball. And so, are you going to fill out a bracket? I know you don't. You're going to say, "Well, I don't know much about the teams," but are you going to fill out a bracket, Mark?
I haven't probably in at least 5 years. It's not crossed my mind to do.
I need you to fill out a bracket, and here's what I need you to do. I need you to enter into the From the Hawkeye of the Storm pool.
Okay.
I'll send you.
I will do that because of that purpose.
Label it Mark Rogers so everybody knows that it's you, and I'll get you the link for that. It's in the description of all my videos now.
I know it seems very strange to people because I get this reputation for hating certain things, and basketball would be one of those, and that is not the case.
Why are you, what do you mean you get a reputation for hating things? What does that mean? Explain that to me.
I'm pretty extreme in my likes and dislikes in life, both in sports and otherwise.
Gotcha.
So when it's come up to basketball, I have just shut down the basketball conversation on a regular basis. And so I've gotten this reputation from some people that I hate basketball. And I've just made comments around tournament time that I don't know what's going on. I don't watch it, that sort of thing. But I've spent years and years and years and thousands of hours watching college basketball and enjoying it.
I think you have done a great job. Let me just say this. You've done a great job embracing it, especially the last couple of weeks. You did your college football first round matchups for a college football NCAA tournament. That's a great, acting like it's not there isn't going to help anything. I think you've done a good job embracing it, and you're busy with football, and it's hard to do both. I can tell you because I've had a problem really giving any attention to football over the past week. If it wasn't for these previews, I mean, I'd have a hard time talking about it because there's really not a whole lot going on with football. Everybody's just so focused on basketball.
And there's so much time to prepare for the football season. And this is the time for there to be a spotlight on men's and women's basketball. If your team, in fact, made the tournament. And even if they didn't prior to that, playing in the conference tournament, of course, for any team in the country has that glimmer of hope to get hot for the weekend and make it. But for Iowa men's basketball, of course, and the ladies, I'm finding out today, there's reason to, for a guy like you that's covering Iowa, and football's very prominent, of course, but you can talk about it in May. You can talk about the same things in May that you can talk about now, unless there is some type of news story. And hopefully that's not the case, because typically that's of a negative fashion. Somebody got hurt or something.
Besides, like the NBA draft and, decisions like when Keegan Murray, if Keegan Murray announces he's leaving, which I think he probably will, but like that'll be news. Football is much more, how do I explain it? Football, there's just a lot more to talk about in the off season because of spring practice, because you can talk about strength and conditioning, and you can talk about fall camp, and certainly the NFL draft. And you can just go on and on. Recruiting. There's recruiting in basketball too. I get it. It just seems like an easier topic to be able to maintain interest throughout the off season.
And of course, some of the content that I will be producing, we've talked about this. I'll kind of funnel into this show to get your feedback, because it'll be Big Ten related, like, ranking the Big Ten quarterbacks, ranking the Big Ten running backs, et cetera, et cetera. And on the note, I appreciate you making a comment about me embracing the March Madness aspect and kind of relating it to football. So we put together the 128 team football tournament, NCAA tournament, based on my top 25 and then beyond, the top 130 that actually makes sense from the previous season from 2021. So Iowa at number 21 matches up against Rice, as you noted in your tweet. Rice at 108, Iowa at 21. So I think I'll play along. So I'm going to ask for your advice on this point. Should I play along trying to predict what could be upsets like a regular tournament? Or if I just play chalk all the way through, then we know what we're going to have at the end. We're going to have the 4 1 seeds playing for the national championship in football. Or I could try to just make it interesting and say, because there will be upsets, of course, if this were for real.
Well, it would involve a lot more digging, but you could honestly go through and figure out. I mean, here's what you could do, Mark. You could, just like I would do, and what I did when I made my bracket selections here this past weekend after the bracket was released. You just go through and you look at the football results from 2021, and you make selections based on resumes, just like you do for the top 25 that actually makes sense. And if again, it would take a bit more research, but actually matchups and what type of an offense would cause this defense problems and vice versa. It's going to take some serious work. You got 128 teams that you. So what, you have 2 that didn't make the field? Is that what you have?
That's what we had to do, right?
Who are the 2 that didn't make it?
That would be UConn and one of the New Mexico schools, because they're both awful. They're both in the bottom 5. It's either New Mexico or New Mexico State.
What a shame. But no, I think that's a great idea. And if you do it if you just chalk it up just because of, based on rankings, well, that's never how a real tournament works anyway. So no, I think I would find that fascinating. But I thought maybe you'd do a field of 68. I thought maybe you'd act as the tournament committee, or I thought maybe you would reach out to a bunch of your personalities and form a tournament committee and like do a mock selection live on the,
you're setting me up for next year.
I had these ideas in my head when I saw what you did, but yeah. In fact, the reason I bring up the mock committee, I had a good conversation with Tim Kruger, who's a bracketologist with Stadium. Had him on the show last week, and he and a bunch of the bracketologists did a mock simulation basically over Zoom and let people actually observe how it's done and how the committee actually goes about selecting the field. And from the people I've gotten feedback from, it was really an enjoyable. I didn't get to watch it, but it was a really enjoyable experience. And it is a science. There's no question about it. I used to kind of downplay bracketology, and yeah, it's true. If you can be the copycat and claim yourself. I think there are a lot of people out there that do that, right? I mean, you're gonna basically take the top 50 teams or the top 60 teams, because then the final few picks come down to less than 10 teams anyways. So anybody can be a bracketologist, but to really do it from scratch, it does take science and understanding. So you could do the same thing with football, Mark.
Okay. Now, to take it to the degree that you just took us, I think maybe a project for next year.
Absolutely. Well, and we're past Selection Sunday.
Yeah.
You could call it Selection Saturday, and because if college football's on Saturday anyways, call it Selection Saturday. Do it the Saturday before Selection Sunday.
Or Selection Monday, just because I think there's going to be too many people focused on basketball on Saturday.
It doesn't roll off the tongue, though.
No, it doesn't. The alliteration doesn't work. No. So I have to bring this up because I'm going to move us back into football, and it's not really Iowa related, but it is because of the many discussions we've had since the end of the season. Okay, JT Daniels is going to be making a decision here soon, and it looks to be down to Missouri, Oregon State, and
Virginia.
West Virginia. What do all three of those schools have in common in relation to Iowa? It's that they're not as good as Iowa. So why would Iowa not be more attractive for JT Daniels to sign with Iowa over West Virginia, Oregon State, or Missouri?
Because first of all, Iowa doesn't have any interest in JT Daniels. That's the main reason, Mark. You know that. They don't have any interest in going to get JT Daniels. They're all in on the Spencer Petras show, and the sooner you accept it as an Iowa fan, the sooner you can get on with your life and get on with your fandom. And here's the thing about JT Daniels, Mark. He has not proven much. I mean, he's a highly touted kid. He has not proven. My question, my follow-up to that, if I was a cynic, if I was Kirk Ferentz and I was just trying to defend my own actions, I'd say, well, why haven't some better programs? Because those three programs are not in great shape. I mean, Oregon State's okay. Or Oregon State's 6-6 this past year.
7-5.
Mizzou was 6-6. Was it West Virginia? Were they like 6-6? So I mean,
yep.
They're middle of the pack teams. I guess maybe I'm selling them all a little short. They also lost. That's the other thing Kirk would say, Mark. Mizzou lost Connor Bazelak. West Virginia lost Daggy. I don't know who Oregon State lost, if they lost anybody, but that's also an argument.
They did. They all have a wide open job. Right. He can go. Yes, he's not going to have to compete like he would at Iowa for the job. But I would argue that, yes, JT Daniels is not accomplished at this level. He's not proven anything in regards to leading a team for an entire season to anything significant, but he's played enough that we know he can play and play well.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I'm just giving you the opposite side and the counter argument. I don't agree with the counter argument, but that's just what people. I mean, Mark, I would failed to go after Bo Nix, Zach Calzada, who beat Alabama, Jaden Daniels, who was the freshman of the year, offensive freshman of the year in the Pac-12. You just go down the list. We Keaton Slovis at USC, who was proven, Adrian Martinez, who even though Adrian Martinez was a bit erratic, the dude was a gamer. I'd opened him, welcomed him with open arms here. So
JT Daniels is Spencer Petras, but better. He's the same type quarterback, but he's better.
I remember you saying that about Keaton Slovis too.
Keaton Slovis. But JT Daniels, yes, he's not accomplished at this level but just to briefly, and I know this could be viewed as a waste of time, and we might be getting comments based on me taking us down this road, but I'll just sum this up in 10 to 15 seconds. JT Daniels won the USC job for a team that had just won the Pac-12 championship, gone to the Cotton Bowl, produced Sam Darnold. JT Daniels won the starting quarterback job at USC in a season in which he was supposed to be a high school senior. He graduated early, and at that young age, still won the quarterback job at USC. Didn't have an outstanding season, but they kind of fell off the rails. But he had a decent season under difficult conditions. They went 5-7. He gets hurt the second game the next season, transfers to Georgia, wins the job against a room that's just packed with ridiculous talent. Not proven talent, but talent. He wins the job this past season after winning the job about mid-season last year, meaning in 2020, winning 5 consecutive games down the stretch. And that Cincinnati defense that made the playoff the next season with the 2 corners that are going to play in the NFL, he did pick on them for 400 yards in the Peach Bowl. He can play.
No, I won't be surprised. Listen, if he goes to do you have a feeling either way on JT Daniels? I mean, my guess is maybe West Virginia, because that's probably the best of the 3 programs right now.
And that's his former offensive coordinator from USC, Graham Harrell, now the OC at West Virginia.
Man, Graham Harrell's at West Virginia. I didn't realize that. Yeah, so if he ends up there, I mean, West Virginia's they've had success. I wouldn't be surprised to see them. And they've also produced some pretty good quarterbacks over the years, very underrated. Not trying to think, they haven't really produced a lot of NFL guys, but I mean, I think was it Pat White?
Pat White was extremely good. Of course, you're talking late 2000s. Yeah, 07, 08. But Will Grier here just a few years ago was exceptional.
So yeah, no, they'll be fine. I mean, he'll be fine if he goes there. I I I don't know what to say. It's just until
I'm
there's
done.
movement until there's movement in the quarterback room, Mark, and that's player prompted. In other words, if Petrus or Padilla decide to leave, and that could happen after spring. I mean, I really am excited. I hope I don't seem like I'm not. I am excited for spring practice to start because I mean, you and I both know, Mark. Once, if you're a college sports guy and you're an Iowa fan, you love basketball, you love football. Once March Madness is, once your team loses, it's you're done until September when actual games start. So spring practice is a big deal. Fall camp's a big deal. There's always again recruiting to talk about, but I'm excited about spring practice, and I guess this would be a good segue. Let me answer Eric's question first. He says, "This is funny." He says, "Field hockey? Do you mean lacrosse?" No, I don't mean lacrosse, because Mark, you know this. You as a sports guy, there is a difference, and I find this it's ironic. And I'm not picking on Eric, but he's obviously an Oregon Duck fan, and he seems to be one of your big supporters, Mark, which is great.
Absolutely.
But that explains why he doesn't know what field hockey is, because field hockey basically does not exist on the West Coast. And it's Iowa's fortunate to have a really, really good field hockey program. And I mean, you go up, I was just looking up when I saw that question, I figured I'd look up the top teams, and they're all here east. So no, Eric, if you don't know what field hockey is, look it up. And Iowa just had a scandal with not a scandal, but a situation with a former coach that made national headlines, Mark. It was a big story. Anyways, Iowa kind of got in some trouble, and it cost them financially. So, anyways, but as it relates to the wide receiver room, Mark, I'll go ahead and pop up the group here. This is who is coming back, who is on scholarship this coming year. Nico Reganey, of course, is a guy who I had speculated at one time, Mark. Will Nico Reganey come back? Because you have Tyrone Tracy leave. He, of course, came in with Nico at the same time. Nico Reganey didn't really have a great year last year, had some problems with drops. I thought a lot of the guys had problems with drops last year, to be quite frank. And I don't know that Petrus throws, I think he throws a pretty catchable ball when it's accurate. And so that surprised me that a guy like Nico Reganey, who's played with Spencer a lot, had some problems there. But he'll be back, assuming he doesn't leave. Keegan Johnson will be back. He's a guy, if I'm Iowa, you've got to continue to recruit guys, even who are in your own program, Mark, because the transfer portal is a real thing. You know, his dad was a star at Nebraska. He's an Omaha guy himself. But he's going to be he's already made some huge plays as a Hawkeye, as a true freshman. Remember, he was a true freshman last year, as was Arlen Bruce, whose dad also was a really good football player in his own right. Charlie Jones opted to come back another year. That really helps Iowa, specifically in special teams. We know what he's done, returning the football on punts, returning kicks. So that's just huge to get him back. I'd say the biggest return of anybody. I know Laporta opted to come back. Jack Campbell opted to come back. I think you could argue that Charlie Jones coming back was the biggest, and it was the most controversial, or I should say up in the air move, because we just didn't know. I mean, Laporta and Campbell, it was pretty much a sure thing those guys were returning. But Charlie Jones, I think, could have maybe taken his shot at the league. I don't know if there's a place for him. He's got good athleticism, good speed, certainly could be a return specialist. I don't know if there's a place for him in the NFL someday. Deontay Vines is also a guy that really hasn't seen any time. And he's kind of the last of the group, Mark, of guys who have been here at least, 2 years, who's still here that hasn't played at all. You know, Desmond Hudson left. Quavon Matthews left. Tyrone Tracy left. Now, Tracy obviously played a lot during his time at Iowa. But Vines, we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised to see one or two of these guys enter the portal after spring practice. Not saying it's going to be anybody specific. Brody Brecht is a baseball player, a really good baseball player, really good pitcher. I had high hopes from him coming out of Ankeny initially, and I'm not saying I don't now, but he is such a good baseball player. You just wonder. We've seen what happened with Connor McCaffrey, what has happened with Connor McCaffrey trying to split his time between basketball and baseball. He's basically given up on his baseball career, And in a way, it's sad, but in a way, basketball just kind of took over. And I'm sure he loves the sport, loves playing for his dad. But it's just hard to balance, Mark. And I know there's guys who do it. Kyler Murray did it. Did he do it for how many years did he do it for, Mark?
I don't know exactly. I know it was most of his college career.
So I mean, it's possible.
Yeah.
But Brody Brecht as a wide receiver, it's going to be hard because he's stuck behind Johnson, Bruce, Jones, and Reganey unless somebody leaves. But he does have the size at what 6'3", 6'2", to pretend. Actually, I think Iowa lists him at 6'4". I looked at that earlier. They list him at 6'4", so he's got good size. And again, he's really the only guy left that you could say really fills that X position. Jackson Ritter's a walk-on listed at 6'3", but that's about it. Now, Jacob Bostic is not here yet, but he fits the mold. I'm going to pull up his bio for anybody who's not familiar with Jacob. He's one of the recruits of 22 that I actually did not get a chance to speak with after signing day. But yeah, listed at 6'3" out of high school, $170. He's obviously going to have to get bigger. But Mark, it does happen where Iowa plays true freshmen. If they earn their way, they earn their way. Now, Johnson and Bruce had the advantages of being able to be here this past spring. So with Bostic not here early, it's going to make it hard for him to see the field. So I would guess that it's probably going to take a year for him to really see action on offense. But that's about it. And the one guy I didn't mention who has played would be Jackson Ritter. Last I knew, he was a walk-on, but he did play some significant time last year. Early on, he was maybe the fourth guy, which surprised some people. And eventually, with the emergence of both Johnson and Bruce, that kind of went to the back burners. But it's nice to have a guy like that who I'm sure is probably going on scholarship in your back pocket. So I'll say it again. I've said it about several of the positions we've looked at, including running back, which is young, the offensive line, which has struggled. I'm okay with the personnel. I'm okay with the personnel. I think they've got good speed. Arlen Bruce, I don't want to overhype him, but he, if he could become a poor man's Rondale Moore, and I mean, keep in mind, I'm saying a poor man's Rondale Moore, because Rondale Moore we know was spectacular. But Bruce, that's good production there, Mark, for a true freshman year where he was, I mean, Tyrone Tracy was expected to be kind of the receiver that Bruce ended up being. And I'm not saying that Bruce is the reason Tracy left, but Bruce just took a lot of his playing time. He was pretty sure-handed, was good. He's going to run a lot of jet sweeps for you. He's got good quickness. He's more physical. I remember a couple runs, specifically one maybe against Maryland, where he put his shoulder down and kind of bowled his way into the end zone. And that's a good thing to see out of a guy who's listed at 5'9". I mean, this guy's listed at 5'9", 5'10" at the max. And he's a physical runner, so that's good news. You hope that some of these guys can develop. We obviously know quarterback is the biggest factor in the passing game, and these guys got to be able to run block as well. I'm sure that's probably their biggest need moving forward. It's probably not pass catching or route running; it's probably run blocking. But if Spencer Petras can, or Alex Padilla, whoever plays, those guys can get these guys the ball. I'm fine with the personnel. And again, you're going to get a year of spring for the first time for some of these guys, specifically. Well, Bostic won't be here early. And I really don't know that I'm kind of thinking of this as I go, Mark, because Brody Brecht is playing baseball right now. Their baseball season just got underway. I have no idea what the situation is with Brody in spring practice. That's a great question. I'll have to reach out to the University of Iowa, because I guess that never even crossed my mind. But if he's not there for the spring, I mean, how is he going to ever make headway? So I'm not saying he'll give up football, but it's just an odd situation, and it's going to be hard for him to gain traction at that position.
So in general, in addition to this particular group of wide receivers for 22, as you rate and evaluate Iowa position groups, and we've talked about on the upside, the tight ends, defensive ends, other positions, corner, safety, etc. On the downside, offensive line being maybe a little overrated based on what the standard's been and the perception that it's underachieved in recent years. And of course, quarterback, the wide receiver group in general, I'm going to tell you that it doesn't get a whole lot of talk. It doesn't get a whole lot of credit nationally Iowa wide receivers. But you feel that this has been a pretty good group from year to year recently.
Well, that's a great question because you may remember, Mark, that the 2015 year where Iowa went 12-0 and nearly went to the college football playoff, that was a year where wide receiver was really, really lacked a lot of production. Really, Tavon Smith was the only. I mean, Matt Vandenberg was okay. He made some plays. He had good chemistry with C.J. Beathard. I think they were pretty close friends. But it was Tavon Smith, Matt Vandenberg, and a guy named Jacob Hillier who got. I don't know if you can pull up Jacob Hillier's stats. He played a lot. Really good run blocker, but that was just a so-so. That was just a so-so wide receiver room. And then 16, it kind of took a bigger step back. They lose Tavon Smith. Matt Vandenberg broke his foot that year heading into the season. Riley McCarron, you may remember that name. Riley McCarron was Iowa's top pass catcher, and he was, no offense to Riley, in fact, he actually had a shot. I don't know that he ever made an active roster, but he was trying his hand in the league for a while. But he was undersized. I think he was probably 5'10" or so, maybe even 5'9". Kind of reminded me of a poor man's Wes Welker. But at this level, that Riley McCarron probably shouldn't be your number one wide receiver. And it struggled. And then, I've given a lot of credit to Kelton Copeland. He comes in from Northern Illinois and gets Amir Smith-Marset, Brandon Smith, Max Cooper, who I know didn't play much this past year, unfortunately, had injury problems throughout his career, but I'm guessing was a leader for that unit. And then now with recruiting Tyrone Tracy, Nico Reganey, Keegan Johnson, Charlie Jones from Buffalo, Arlen Bruce, he's done well on the recruiting trail. I still think there's room for improvement from a performance standpoint. We talked about route running and certainly drops were a problem last year. Run blocking is going to always be a work in progress. I think Brandon Smith was a really good run blocker, partially just because of his physicality. But Mark, none of these guys have really made their name in the NFL. We talked about running back. We've talked about quarterback. You can say the same thing about wide receiver. Who's made it in the league from Iowa? Brandon Smith ain't playing in Dallas very much. I mean, I think he maybe was on the active roster part of the season. I have to look back. Smith-Marset, I know, caught a touchdown or two for Minnesota late in the year. Both those guys, I mean, if they can find a niche in the league, it will help. But you and I both know, Mark, that it is hard to recruit wide receivers and elite wide receivers here to Iowa when, I mean, I would have to think if I'm an elite wide receiver, which we all know I am, Mark, I'm an elite wide receiver. If I'm an elite wide receiver, why do I want to come play for a school that's so run heavy and doesn't seem to really value the passing game? Because that's the perception I have about Iowa football right now. As great as I love Iowa and as great as the defense has been, and at times the running game is good, very rarely is it great. But I look at the passing game and I see it doesn't look like they really value the passing game. I mean, you just, not to go back on the Brian Ferentz issue, Mark, but you just hired a guy who has never coached quarterbacks before, never played quarterback, never coached quarterback. So you're going to tell me that you really value, high efficiency and prolific passing? Come on. That's not true. And you're not willing to go out or go get a quarterback who's an upgrade. You are okay. You're content with subpar quarterback play because you're not interested in getting somebody who can develop the guys you have, and you're not interested in getting someone other than the guys you have. So that all goes into this. It all goes into recruiting. It's not just the NFL thing. So it's a valid point. I give Kelton Copeland credit because the wide receiver room was in the dumps when Kelton took over, and he has elevated it, but you got to have somebody to throw him the ball, Mark. That's as simple as I can put it. And somebody who's calling good pass plays and who's teaching these wide receivers how to get open and how to gain separation. Those are all things that Iowa has struggled with over the years.
Great stuff from Corey here at the Voice of College Football. And of course, you should all know that are watching here, whether it be live or on the replay, to catch Corey on a regular basis, football and basketball. Of course, it's March Madness, and Iowa's set up to succeed on the men's and women's side of March Madness here. So From the Hawkeye at the Storm is the place to be. And Mark, again, you're going to be live a little bit later tonight.
We'll be live a little bit later, 9 o'clock Central Time. I don't want to ignore a comment that was texted to our text line, my text line that Steve from Escondido, California wanted me to share. And I'll have you read this if you don't mind, Mark, to kind of finish things up here. And so I'll give you a background before I share it in the chat. And thank you. I see the super chat from Eric. So thank you, Eric, for that. Gonna have to post this in a couple different, because this is a long message. You want to get to the super chat first, Mark?
Sure.
You can find it here if you want. There it is.
Oh,
sorry. Go ahead.
There we go. Eric, thank you so much for that. Appreciate that. There are not enough cornfields on the West Coast to play field hockey at a high level. Join us on Discord, please. All right. Thank you, Eric. Eric and let's see, Tim, and there's a few others, but certainly Eric and Tim have been phenomenal in pushing and promoting our Discord. So what you do there is go to Patreon, search MarkRogersTV, sign up there. I get you the link to get you on Discord. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, it's just a big chat room, because I didn't know what Discord was 2 months ago myself. It's just a big chat room that we currently have divided into various conferences, but you can jump around and talk college football nonstop, 24/7, 365, whenever your heart desires. For many of you, even beyond the conversations that we have here on the various shows, you like to be in the live chat, and I get it, to talk college football with all sorts of college football fans. So you can do that all the time on our Discord. Again, go to Patreon, search Mark Rogers TV. I get you the link. You're all set. You can talk college football all the time with Eric and others.
So, yes, thank you, Eric. And James, I didn't want to ignore your question. How much do you think Reganey will play because of depth in front of him? That's a great question. That's why I've speculated about him leaving. I just don't know. I mean, is he going to get much time? I have a feeling. I think we're going to see somebody leave that room after spring. And maybe it's not Reganey. Maybe it's Deontay Vines. Maybe Breck gives up football. I don't think Breck's going to give it up this quick, but I have a hunch. I don't have any inside information on that, but it's a great question from James. And Real Hayden says, Corey, did you see Petrus suspending his spring break with your boy, Tony Rasiopi? He ain't my boy, Hayden. I tell you that right now. He ain't my boy. I did see that on Twitter. But thank you for pointing that out. And give a shout out to Lemansky in the chat. Okay, so here is the boy. I had YouTube split this up. I'll try to read through this, Mark, unless you want to read it. Would you rather me read it?
If you're going to answer it, I'll set you up by reading it.
Go ahead. It's a multi-text question, so I'll continue to open it up as you finish here.
I wondered if you could use this on your show. I'm sure that Kirk is aware of what you say and what the fans think when you say it. I think he needs to be aware what other schools are doing and hiring to be more competitive. Sometimes coaches get comfortable in the way they do things. I remember Kirk bragging about doing his first email 2 years ago. Maybe the portal is too new to him. I think Kirk is a good coach for the talent he has. We just need more 4- and 5-star players, because even when he does a project lineman, if he's good, he's gone pro before becoming a senior. I just thought you might be interested in what Penn State is doing in a very successful recruiting program. It looks to me like they have already recruited a starting quarterback to replace Clifford. Clifford has been injured and so many times and looks a little gun shy and inaccurate. In my opinion, Franklin has scrambled to get some top quality prospects to replace him. Kirk needs a wake-up call in coaching, assistants, etc.
And I don't know why it cut off the let me get the last part of that message. I'm not sure why it cut that off. Okay, there's the last part of it.
And One 4-star quarterback, if better than the other, should play, not wait 2 years, or he will be gone too. Franklin made the mistake, and their quarterback left for Kentucky, who beat us in the bowl game. He was better than Clifford. Franklin picked the dinged up Clifford over a good game manager in Will Levis.
Okay, so there's a lot in that message, and I need your help in kind of dissecting it. But this was Eric. Sorry, I just laughed at what Eric just commented. But no, I do appreciate Steve from Escondido for writing this in. It was a very long message, Steve. So forgive me if I'm having to kind of dissect this. But good question, and I believe he's bringing up the quarterback that they just brought in. Is it Drew Alar? I don't know if you know who that is.
Yes,
but
absolutely. He's
was he a
great.
5-star?
It's a 5-star from Ohio.
So
Medina, Ohio. Yes.
And so I think what he's getting at, to sum this up, and I apologize, Steve, you can send a message into the text line if I'm misquoting you or misrepresenting how you're feeling. He's frustrated, again, with lack of portal use, and he's frustrated that Penn State has been able to really use the portal effectively and recruit quality quarterbacks like Drew Alar. And now it's always going to be easier to recruit. In my belief, it's always going to be easier to recruit at Penn State. I just think it is. There's more history there. You know, you obviously have some bad history there as well, but from a football standpoint, there's a lot more history. And I think we can agree State College is I've never been there, but from everything I've heard, it's a great place. So I understand where Steve is coming from. One guy that Iowa actually lost to Penn State is Hunter Norzad, the big right tackle that Iowa really could have used. Penn State grabs him from Cornell, and I don't know. I suppose I could let me go ahead and grab that here, Mark. I know we're trying to get out of here, but let me go ahead and pull up the transfer portal and just to see, because Iowa's gotten one guy, as we know, from the transfer portal, and that is Steven Stilianos. And I don't know how many guys Penn State has lost, how many guys they've gained. Looks like they've got several guys who are still in the portal, but they lost Noah Kane. They lost, looks like a defensive lineman to Temple. They lost Taquan Roberson to UConn. Des Holmes goes to Arizona State. So they lost a lot of guys, but they get Mitchell Tinsley, wide receiver from Western Kentucky. Mentioned Hunter Norzad. So they only got, according to this, I'm looking at 247 Sports here. They've only actually secured 2 commitments from the transfer portal. But again, I think its frustration is, you could argue they got a really good difference maker on offense in Norzad, and they're able to go get the big names, and they're not afraid to go get the big names. And I have no doubt that if Kirk could go get a 5-star quarterback, he probably would.
I would hope so.
But Mark, there's 5-star quarterbacks that are in the portal, and he doesn't go after and go out and getting them. So what's the difference? I know he'll say, well, the difference is I want to be able to breed them here. I want to be able to shape them and form them and mold them like a potter on a wheel here at Iowa. But that's, to me, I just don't understand the thinking. So Steve, if you're out there, I promised I'd share that message on here. I understand where you're coming from. He's sizing Iowa up to a program that, even though they had a rough year, I mean, Penn State had a rough year. They've had 2 straight rough years now, Mark, where nobody's really talking about that, and yet they're recruiting pretty well.
Really well. I think 6th in the country.
So in
this 22 class, they had a great class.
Why isn't Iowa able to recruit that well? Now, Iowa's recruiting well also, but not to the level of Penn State, and certainly not at some key positions like offensive line, quarterback, etc. And I would, I mentioned what's his face from, is it Western Kentucky? That Mitchell Tinsley, the wide receiver.
He's good. He had a huge year, big numbers at Western Kentucky.
Is that because of Bailey Zappi, or is that because of Mitchell Tinsley?
Well, he's got to catch the ball. So he did.
Yeah.
Caught like 14 touchdowns.
So I understand what do you dissect something different from that thread of messages from Steve?
Well, it sounds like he's not impressed with James Franklin, but still credits James Franklin with at least acquiring talent. He it sounds like doesn't always trust that Franklin's going to make the right decision with the talent, but at least he goes out and gets it.
Yeah.
I would take exception with assuming that Will Levis is better than Sean Clifford. I think that's debatable.
It's debatable. I'd rather have either one of them here.
Yeah. And without doing much analysis, I'd rather have Clifford, but I'm not saying that it's not. It is debatable. I think it's an argument. I think they're close. They're comparable.
They're
But
similar
yes,
players, aren't they? I mean, they're kind of similar in how they play.
yeah, Levis is more of a runner, though. Clifford's a willing runner, and he doesn't mind running, but he's a pass first guy.
Throws pretty well on the run, I can tell you that.
Yeah, he throws well on the run, but Levis is a runner.
Yeah, and he's more of a physical. He's more of a physical guy. I mean, he's just a.
But yeah, both of them should be starting at Iowa, or would be starting at Iowa, I would assume. And the one thing I want to make clear, and you can give your take on this, Corey, because I don't want to speak for you, but I believe that I am. If Spencer Petras, we just addressed him in regards to what how he's spending his spring break, and so that's all credit to him. He's wanting to improve.
Absolutely.
And if he does improve and goes out and have a great year, certainly you would be ecstatic if he went out and threw 25
Absolutely.
touchdown passes and was a top 3 quarterback in the conference. And I would give him all credit. So we are merely evaluating what he's done to present. It's no knock on him, nor rooting against him in any such way, or not respecting his ability and respecting the work that he puts in to try to be a better player.
Or him as a person.
Yeah.
He's had, he's had, and Steven, thank you. This is apparently Steve. So Steve, I don't think Steve's ever commented through the chat. This is the Steve that just left the message over the text line. Steve says, sorry for the long dissertation. I saw a difference in the way he played after he got tackled at Iowa. Talking about Clifford, I'm assuming. Yeah, the big hit from Campbell is what he's referring to. No, I appreciate the comment, Steve, and I appreciate the text. But you're right. It's nothing personal with Spencer Petras. I'm not knocking his work ethic. I know he's done a lot of good in the community. It's got nothing to do with that. If anything, it's an indictment on coaching. And I look at you got to weigh also history under Kirk Ferentz, regardless of who is coaching quarterbacks. Has there been significant quarterback development from one year to the next? And we know the answer to that question is, for the most part, no. So what reason do I have to believe that there's going to be some big jump because we're sending our starter out east to train with a guy who is the offensive coordinator at a high school in Jersey, a high school that has a winning record since he's been there. I mean, I'm not trying to knock him either. It's just, these are the facts. These are the facts, Mark. Here we go. 3 months ago, we were talking about quarterbacks. We're right back on that horse. Didn't take us long at all, did it? Right in the middle of March Madness.
I had to bring up JT Daniels, but he's in the news and he's down to a decision, and that decision does not include Iowa. So,
and he's, for the most part, he's the last guy out there.
Sure appears that way. I can't. I know that there will be quarterbacks just like every other position represented in the portal once we get through spring practice and guys size themselves up and determine that their current location is not the place to be. But you can't imagine that a top of the line quarterback that could compete for the job at the likes of an Iowa would be available.
Yeah, there was a kid from like Florida Tech, which is like Division II, that entered that actually kind of intrigued me because he put up some ridiculous numbers. But again, it's Division II or III. I can't remember. He committed to a school. I don't know if it was a Group of 5 or FCS, but he got a Division I job here this past week. And I, again, I'm not a quarterback expert, so I'm not going to, they need to go get this guy. I've never said that, other than I was pretty forthright about Jaden Daniels because the guy's proven himself at a high level. I'd like to say that I trust the guys who are recruiting these players at a high school and from, lesser schools.
So are you telling me that Jaden Daniels has proven himself and JT Daniels has not proven himself?
Well, I mean, has Jaden Daniels not proven himself, Mark?
No, I'm going to make the point that I don't think he has any more than JT Daniels has.
he was the co-offensive player of the year in the Pac-12 his freshman year.
I bet JT Daniels has thrown more touchdown passes in college than Jaden Daniels. I know it's close. They basically played about similar amounts of time and been pretty comparable.
Certainly, JT Daniels had better pieces around him. I think we can agree with that, right? I mean, than what Jaden Daniels had at Wazoo, and that's a factor.
Arizona State.
Who are we talking about?
Arizona State.
I'm mixing up Jaden DeLora. I'm sorry, Jaden DeLora.
Okay.
I forget there's a Jaden Daniels in the Pac-12 and a Jaden DeLora in the Pac-12, both of which are mobile and both of which did not pick Iowa.
Yes.
Sorry, yeah. Mark.
Okay. Jaden Daniels.
Laura Daniels, whoever you want to, they're all better than Iowa.
Either one of them. Okay. Yes. Yes. And
remember just Jaden DeLora picked Arizona, as you know.
Yeah.
Mark.
And so Jaden DeLora also, much like what it appears JT Daniels is about to do, is going to go to a program that's not even close to Iowa's caliber. And Jaden Daniels, actually, even though LSU is LSU and arguably a top 5 to 15 program in the country, Jaden Daniels did not shy away from a quarterback competition. He is going to have to battle for that job versus Iowa. Sure, he'd have to compete. Spencer, I'm not going to take that away from Spencer Petras that Jaden Daniels wouldn't just walk in and get the job at Iowa either, that he would have to compete for it. But
yeah, and willing. You got to be willing to go after somebody. Iowa. Connor Bazelak, same way. I would not be surprised to see Indiana take a jump. Now, it's hard to go anywhere but up when you're on the ground, and that's where Indiana's at right now. All right, they are bottom of the barrel in the Big Ten, but the bottom line is Connor Bazelak, I believe, was freshman of the year at Mizzou, SEC freshman of the year. So he's a talented guy. I would not be surprised to see Indiana do well. And answer to Mike's question, is there a bracket for Voice of College Football? There is. So, Mike, go to my channel, the description of our stream tonight and future streams. You'll see that. It's a CBS group. If anybody wants to join to compete against myself, hopefully Mark will join, and we're going to try to get some other names on there as well. But anybody who's a listener can enter that bracket challenge through CBS Sports. Just follow the URL in the description of our stream tonight.
I only have one other thing to say, and that's to respond to Eric here, because we were talking about what Jaden Daniels has proven and what JT Daniels has proven, and I made the statement that they've thrown roughly the same number of touchdown passes. Therefore, in my book, he's played just as much football and accomplished just as much, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, Eric saying Jaden Daniels 10 touchdown passes last year and JT Daniels 7. I get that. They have both thrown. The point, though, is not about how much they played last year. It's how much have they proven over the course of their careers. And Eric, they have both thrown 32 touchdown passes. So that was my point.
JT's a bit, and I think probably Kirk's a bit nervous going to a guy like JT who's bounced around to now 3 different schools. That would probably be a concern from Kirk.
And he's been injured.
He's been injured, but we can always find excuses as to why we don't want to go to the portal. And that's just what it is. They're just always going to find excuses as to why you don't want to do that.
All right. I'm going to head off for our Nebraska show. So, folks, if you want to keep talking college football, even though it is the enemy, Nebraska's show starts in just a few minutes on the Nebraska channel. So join us there.
Appreciate the time, Mark. Fun as always.
Thank you. Thanks, Corey.